Parts may have a little bit of fog developing again tonight, but further west we're going to see increasing amounts of clouds, strengthening winds and some rain because there's a frontal system that's marching its way in. It's quickly going to spread across much of Northern Ireland, some heavy persistent rain developing here as we go overnight. Rain also feeding in across much of Wales, southwest England and filtering a little bit further eastwards as well, perhaps into western parts of Scotland at times too. Further east, staying drier, some clear skies here, could be a bit chilly. And with that, like I said at the start, there could be some fog patches developing. Further west, a milder start to the day tomorrow because of the cloud, because of the rain and those blustery winds. We're talking gales in some exposed spots towards the west. So we start tomorrow on a bit of a damp note across many central, southern, western parts of England and Wales. That rain gradually making its way eastwards. Some glimmers of sunshine breaking through, however, from the west. Also pretty wet still across much of Northern Ireland, particularly towards the north. Some high rainfall totals likely to build up. Whilst northeastern parts of Scotland starting the day quite bright with just a few coastal showers around. Elsewhere it's going to be cloudy and increasingly wet as that rain continues to make its way north and eastwards across many places. It's going to make quite slow progress, so it will take a fair while to clear away from some eastern, northeastern parts until well after dark tomorrow. But further west, something drier, brighter following in behind. Yes, some showers around, but a bit more sunshine on offer. Worth noting though, temperatures down a couple of degrees compared to today. Then after a cold, perhaps frosty, maybe foggy start for some of us on Friday morning, there'll be a bit of showery rain coming in before more unsettled weather arrives from the west as we go through the afternoon. So further heavy rain and some strengthening winds as well. And that takes us into what's set to be quite an unsettled weekend. Not a total washout. There will be some dry weather around, but also some pretty unsettled weather too. Bye-bye.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
It's the greatest cash prize of the Great British Giveaway so far. A simply stunning £85,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like, making 2026 your greatest year to date. That could get you that brand new car, extend and improve your home, take you away on that bucket list holiday, or just give you some peace of mind over the coming months. For a chance to win £85,000 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB18 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 30th of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight.
Graced himself, he's embarrassed the royal family time and again. He should just go and lead a quiet life now, away from the public gaze.
The Royal Lodge issue has come under scrutiny since the former Prince Andrew lost his titles. The debate now extends to the houses of the Prince and Princess of Wales and Princess Alexandra. The Public Accounts Committee, the most august committee of the House of Commons, is launching an inquiry. The tiny sums involved, trivial amounts in the broad scheme of things, is a pittance compared to what the government spends on welfare, which is hundreds of billions. And it seems to me a nation is either a monarchy or it's not. Also tonight.
I said I would cut debt and borrowing, and I meant it.
Oh dear, more bad news for the economy as a new report from Sir John Redwood reveals Rachel Reeves' budget may be hiding over £1 trillion in extra borrowing, burdened with accusations of misleading the public and trust in Labour's economic management at a record low. Is Britain's outlook worse than we feared? Plus.
And we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here.
After an attack on 2 National Guard members, President Trump has halted immigration from 19 high-risk countries to prioritise American safety. Meanwhile, Europe faces its own crisis, with senior EU officials accused of corruption. Should Europe and the UK follow Donald Trump's lead and adopt a citizen-first approach? Also, Jaguar Land Rover's design chief, Jerry McGovern, has abruptly left the company. Mr. McGovern was behind the woke rebranding of classic Jaguar and Range Rover logos and aesthetics, which were bad enough to be mocked by Donald Trump. With consumers rejecting politically motivated lefty products, is this the beginning of the end of woke culture? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most preternaturally perspicacious panel, the former Conservative MP and Minister, Sir John Redwood, and the political consultant and former Labour candidate, Kevin Craig. As always, let me know what you think. mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you. The top stories of fiery First Prime Minister's questions since the budget, with Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch clashing over claims the government has lurched into total shambles. The exchanges opened with the Conservative leader questioning who inside Labour's cabinet is briefing against the government, and claimed a CEO with Rachel Reeves' record would have been fired.
We now know that the head of the OBR was forced out for telling the truth, that the Chancellor did not need to raise taxes on working people. We also know that the Chancellor was briefing the media, twisting the facts, also she could break her promises and raise taxes.
Sir Keir Starmer hit back, defending Rachel Reeves. He told MPs his government is fixing the mess the Conservatives left.
She's completely losing the plot. She says take responsibility. Under this Chancellor, Mr. Speaker, growth is up this year, defeating and beating the forecast. Wages are up, more since the general election than in 10 years of the Tories. We've had, I think, 5 interest rate cuts. NHS waiting lists are down. We've had record investment into this country. We're turning the page on their austerity and reckless experiment on borrowing. I'd compare that record to them every day of the week.
Labour MP Marcus Campbell-Savers has had the Labour whip suspended after voting against the government last night. The Penrith and Solway MP rebelled and voted against the government's plans to impose inheritance tax on farmers, telling the Commons he had to do all he could for his community. He warned in the Commons the changes would leave many farmers devastated at the impact on their family farms. Mr Campbell-Savers was informed he'd had the whip removed by Chief Whip Jonathan Reynolds today, according to a Labour source. The Health Secretary says he's had it with the British Medical Association, accusing the Doctors' Union of juvenile delinquency as resident doctors plan a 5-day walkout just before Christmas. Wes Streeting says the strike, starting on the 17th of December, is irresponsible and high risk, warning the NHS is already under New Year's Eve level pressure. The BMA says it's still open to calling off the strike, but the government says it cannot go further on pay. Mr Streeting says industrial action now poses a different order of magnitude of danger for patients. And new images of Jeffrey Epstein's Caribbean island home have been released by Democrats in the US Congress. The pictures and videos show bedrooms, a room with a dentist chair and masks hanging from a wall, and the words power and deception written on a chalkboard. One picture shows a no trespassing sign, while another shows a landline phone with a speed dial list. The Democrats on the House Oversight Committee call the pictures and videos never before seen. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I've got more news in an hour.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Because of all the rows about the former Prince Andrew, people have been looking at the Crown Estates, what they are, how they work, and who benefits from them. So let's go back to history. At the beginning of the reign of George III in 1760, the king was meant to pay for a large slice of the government, and this came out of the Crown Estates. Go back to Elizabeth I, the royal income was meant to pay for the whole of government. This had become impractical in the 18th century, and George III did a deal. He handed over the Crown of States for his reign and in return got a civil list, an amount which could be used to fund the living expenses of the monarchy, indeed of the whole royal family. This carried on with various changes, uprating for inflation of the civil list, until the sovereign grant was introduced in about 2010, which gave a percentage of the Crown Estate's revenue to the Crown. Subsequently, of course, King Charles III. That is an income from which the functioning of the royal family is meant to take place, but the Crown Estates are the patrimony of the king. They don't belong to anybody else. They don't belong to you, the taxpayer. They don't belong to the government. They are the king's property, which he pays probably in reality a higher tax rate than anybody else in the land because he gives most of it to his government. It is, after all, His Majesty's government. The land originates in the mists of time. A lot of it, of course, would have been taken by William the Conqueror, and then quite a chunk would have been taken from the monasteries when the monasteries were dissolved in the 16th century. What the Crown Estate owns, it owns Regent Street, it owns vast swathes of the centre of London, it owns Pall Mall, and so on. And revenue comes from this, and it's now shared between the king and his subjects in the form of His Majesty's government. Within that, the Crown Estates own properties that the king and his family live in. And these are subject to commercial or semi-commercial leases. Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, paid £5 million for his lease and then has to pay a peppercorn rent every year for the lifetime of this lease. This is utterly standard. This is not something that doesn't happen in other contexts, that people pay an upfront fee and then a peppercorn rent. It's how leases historically have often worked. And yet, this is what the Public Accounts Committee wants to look into. And isn't it just the most enormous waste of time? So I've got in front of me this wonderful book produced by the Office for Budget Responsibility, the chairmanless Office for Budget Responsibility. And I've turned to page 132 because it lists welfare spending from 2024 to 2030-31. The chart you can see is the growth in welfare spending on your screens now. And we're not talking about a few £1 million, a few £100,000. We're not talking about an odd little lease. We're talking about an increase in welfare spending from £314.7 billion of your money to £406.2 billion expenditure of your money. And the dear old Public Accounts Committee doesn't want to prioritise this. It wants to prioritise the housing arrangements of Princess Alexandra. Princess Alexandra is a wonderful lady who has served this nation for all of her life. And she lives in a house on Richmond, in Richmond. And that's what they want to look at? Surely, when this nation is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy, as we're going to be discussing later, we are running out of cash. We are taxing too much and spending too much. We should be focusing on the big things, not the little things. And the reason for this is that the committee has got overexcited by a news story. It has an excellent chairman in the form of Geoffrey Clifton Brown, but unfortunately he has a Labour and Lib Dem majority on his committee who have been pushing to look at something that they think will make them look pretty in the camera lights rather than getting on with their proper job. Public Accounts Committee is the most distinguished committee in Parliament. It was set up in the 19th century to make sure the government spent your money properly. Still doesn't spend your money properly, but nonetheless, there's a committee that looks at it. Surely it should be looking at the big items, what matters, what affects you, the way taxes are raised and spent, not on the trivia that they hope will get them onto the news at 10. As always, I want to hear your views. You know what to send it to now, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now I'm joined by a friend of the programme, political commentator Stella Santakido, and, of course, my preternaturally perspicacious panel. Stella, thank you for coming in. It does seem to me that the proportionality of this is absurd, and it's just because of Prince Andrew, the former Prince Andrew, that now some lefties, probably Republicans, want to look at Princess Alexandra's living arrangements. Isn't this just pretty silly?
No, it's not silly. In the same way that you were talking about the welfare budget, which of course is very high, although I would say that the majority of that money goes to pensioners. That is what the majority of our welfare spending goes to. In the same way that you would be looking at people who are receiving disability benefits and people who are receiving unemployment benefits and thinking, it doesn't matter that individually each person may not be receiving very, very much. We need to make sure that they are assessed properly and that they are deserving of the money and that the money goes to the aim that the voter thinks and the taxpayer believes it's going for. At the same way, I think that the public is very right to question, wait a minute, why was Prince Andrew, when he still had his title, allowed to use his taxpayer-funded bodyguard to look into a sex trafficking victim?
But that's a completely different matter, and that's absolutely nothing to do with the Public Accounts Committee and Royal Lodge. With Royal Lodge, he was given a lease, for which he paid a small amount, but on condition he spent £7.5 million on repairs. Again, that's completely standard. Many leases are issued on the basis that you then repair the building that's being let to you. So the Public Accounts Committee isn't looking into the whole Epstein scandal and all of that. That's been looked into countless times by other bodies. So it's just the focus on whether this is the right way for Parliament to use its powers when it ought to be concentrating on the big things.
The Public Accounts Committee job is to bring transparency to the government's finances. And since taxpayers' money goes into the royal family, then the taxpayer
Well, no, it
is
doesn't, because it's
entitled...
not taxpayers' money going into the royal family, because the Crown Estate is the King's.
So do you think that the over 400 properties, and we don't know what's the exact number, that belong in whatever capacity to the king, do you think that the taxpayer doesn't have a right to know exactly how these are being used?
The Crown Estate is given by the monarch to the state or to the government for the duration of the reign. So that is then administered by the government, and it's perfectly reasonable to audit that properly. But it doesn't stop it being the King's property, and the money that he gets back from it is his money, not taxpayers' money.
You know what has happened in other countries when royals spoke like this about their royal property, as you say? They ended up with their heads chopped off. The reason why the royal family in the UK,
that's right.
The reason why the royal family in the UK has managed to survive in the way it does, and I'm certainly grateful that it has, because I think it's a very good symbol, is because they have been adapting over the years. But sometimes they have used methods that the public really doesn't like.
But this is an attack on private property, because the King is surely entitled to his private property in much the same way as anyone else is, and to inherit property. And throughout this country, there are people who have inherited property that's been in their families for hundreds of years, and agricultural land, until recently, was exempt from inheritance tax, so it passed down free of tax in the same way as the Crown Estate.
In the same way that we are subsidising the royal family.
But we're not subsidising, they subsidise us.
I would not say that. I would not say that, absolutely. They are receiving a salary from us.
No, they're not. They give the Crown Estates, from which they get a percentage
a salary
back.
From us.
They do not receive a salary from us. Their land is held by the state, the income's taken by the state, and they keep a share of that income. It's actually a higher rate of tax than the 45p rate that their subjects pay.
Jacob, if I extend the same logic that you are portraying right now to the government, in which you said it is the Majesty's government, it is the Majesty's government, then in that case, since it is the Majesty's government, the Majesty should be able to tell the government what to do. But that is not the case.
No,
so linguistically, you may say that.
The king is entitled to an income from his own property.
The entitlement is given to him by Parliament because we have parliamentary sovereignty. The Parliament gives an entitlement, Parliament takes away the entitlement.
No, it's not actually how it works. The Crown, the king, gives the Crown Estates to the government to administer for his reign in return for a certain sum back. It's a financial arrangement. It's not the government's land that Parliament then gives him an income from. That's not how it works. Even with the civil list was a grant, but the grant was conditional upon the land being held and operated by the government.
The UK has a very particular legal system, which means that a lot of things are done but not said. And that is because it is in the British character to be very subtle and polite about things. And that is how we treat our royals, right? The way you treat the royals is, rather than saying, listen to me, for you to survive, we have decided that this is how we're going to be doing things, so just be very subtle about everything and don't toe the line. It is in the same spirit. The Public Accounts Committee has every right to do an inquiry, and the taxpayer has every right to decide whether the way that the king is dealing with his finances is appropriate or not.
John, former Member of Parliament, of course the Public Accounts Committee has the right to look at this, as Stella was saying, but is it wise to look into something so small when, and we're going to be going on later, some of the figures you've discovered, which you would have thought would be a better use of that time?
It's a complete disgrace, and I think you set out the historical and legal position extremely well, and we're all the beneficiaries of that. And as you rightly say, this was a very good settlement between monarch and Parliament. Parliament is, of course, sovereign, but it needs to respect the monarch and it needs to honour its bargain, and each monarch has the bargain, and it works extremely well. But the figures are so small compared with the disgraceful waste, let alone the size of the benefit budget. And when you look at the colossal increase in the government overhead and the massive expansion of the civil service with billions extra in the last few years, surely that is what this committee ought to be looking at. If they want to help their own Labour government, this Labour majority committee, they should want to get to the facts of where they could save the billions, where the low-hanging fruit is on this groaning tree of public spending. To put the nation in a better position. That nothing good can come of this other inquiry, and it won't save us any real money.
Or, Kevin, they could look at the waste of money in Parliament with this dreadful fence they put outside the House of Lords, the £12 million they spent on a door to get into the House of Lords. You know, these are bigger sums than are involved with this royal housing. It's just grandstanding, isn't it?
I don't think it is grandstanding. I think Stella's right that the committee it can choose what it looks at, and the sums that parliamentarians, as you both know, with distinguished careers in there, at times the sums they examine are of different quantums. And in this case, one of the reasons that they're probably looking at it is because Andrew's antics are so high profile and so many British people feel strongly about them. The fact that they're looking at this one issue does not mean that elsewhere in Parliament, MPs are not looking at a really, really good budget and all it's delivered for kids in poverty, the NHS. And
where was that then? I didn't see one of those.
That leads us perfectly into the break. Thank you. Thank you, whether you started being a comedian. Thank you to Stella and indeed to my panel. In a moment.
I said I would cut debt and borrowing, and I meant it.
More bad news for the economy as a new report from Sir John Redwood reveals that Rachel Reeves's budget may be hiding over £1 trillion in extra borrowing. Is Britain's economic outlook even worse than we feared?
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Just went for an insurance check. You know, in our business, you have to have a check before you do any new program, so you don't drop down dead on the program. And it was all very relaxed, as always, chatting with the doctor and all that. And then he phoned me up the next day and said, "Well, it's slightly worrying. Your PSA is a bit high." I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, it measures the levels of the potential antigens for prostate cancer that you've got." He said, "You'll have to go to a specialist." I went to the specialist and he said, "Yes, you have got very early stages of the indications of prostate cancer." And of course, it felt like my life had collapsed immediately. You know, I was writing the will, I was doing everything. Well, the reality is he was quite cheery about it. He said, "Look, you're likely to die with this. You're not going to die of it, provided that we keep an eye on it all the time, make sure it doesn't flare up." And so ever since then, this, what I thought was going to be this terrible thing 12 years ago, all it means is that every 4 or 6 months, I have to get a check. That's all. But the good news is, and I've been listening to you for the last 20 minutes thinking, oh my God, what a terrible world we're living in. Everything's wrong. I have a great Christmas message for you. Hold on to your seats. If you want to have a check for prostate cancer, you no longer have to have a finger up your bum. Yes! Isn't it the best thing you've heard all day?
Well, that is... But it's funny that we laugh about it, and so we should really, but that is the big obstacle, isn't it? It's the one thing that puts people off.
Yeah, well, it's gone. It's floated away. Those fingers have floated up to the heavens. All you need to do now is have one of those tiny little blood tests, you know, with a pinprick in your arm, and they go away and check it and make sure you're all right.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, DC.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about royal housing. And the mail mogs have come in a horse and carriage today. Eileen says, totally agree with what Jacob is saying about royal homes. This is the socialist government who is jealous of anyone with money and land. Ian, however, takes a contrary view, says, completely invalid comparison, Jacob. Let's have a very small number of royals who live in non-palatial houses and then share in the wealth and or income that they create. Meritocracy at its best. Let's see them set a suitable example. And Elizabeth says it was inevitable when the Windsors abandoned their brother/uncle to the reptiles that they would be next. Well, Chancellor Rachel Reeves, you know, the famous chess champion's economic plans seem to be in the Swiss cheese category, full of holes. A new report by my esteemed panellist, John Redwood, shows that last week's budget hides more than £1 trillion in additional borrowing, turning into what is being called a £1.3 trillion debt mountain. The report argues that refinancing old government loans and higher spending will push national debt to record levels, despite the Chancellor's promises to cut it. Rachel Reeves is facing accusations once again of misleading the public, and new polling reveals public trust in Labour's economic management has fallen to its lowest point ever. So could our outlook economically be worse than we thought? Well, my panel is here, John Redwood and Kevin Craig. John, let me bring you in first. The refinancing of money is debt that we already owe.
Yes, it doesn't add to the stock of debt.
Stock of debt.
But you have to repay it, and then you've got to go to the market and borrow it all over again. So it was as if you were there with your mortgage, and suddenly you had to repay your mortgage. And at the same time, you went to the bank manager and said, I want an overdraft to buy a new car on top. And you've got to look at both of them, and the bank manager might just say, hold on a minute. If I'm going to help you with the refinancing, I'm not going to give you all that mortgage.
And this is a question of whether the gilt market can cope with that quantity of gilts coming on, particularly as the Bank of England is selling bonds, adding to that. And the question that was very popular in the 60s and 70s of crowding out, is that something you're concerned about?
Well, I'm very concerned about it because the previous government borrowed an awful lot over COVID and the Ukraine energy crisis, which all parties wanted them to do. But it was an awful lot of borrowing. They got away with it because the Bank of England was a massive buyer, creating money and buying these bonds at ever higher prices, lower interest rates. And the pension funds were buying more bonds than they could even afford. They were buying it on borrowing and gearing. And all of that has changed now. And so we now have a Chancellor who needs to raise 1.3 trillion, 628 billion for extra spending and 675 billion to replace retiring debt. A huge amount of money over the next 5 years. As you rightly say, the Bank of England's selling them, not buying them. And the pension funds aren't going to be buying very many because they're still sorting themselves out because they own too many of them and couldn't afford them all.
Kevin, let me bring you in on this, because it seems to me this would have been a problem regardless who was in government. It's not particularly Rachel Reeves' problem. But that, with that stock of debt that needs rolling over, actually what should have been done with the tax rises is they should have been used to reduce total expenditure rather than put into more spending.
Well, I'm going to answer that, but can I just clarify what happened on Budget Day, right, which is that investors showed huge confidence in the British economy. They piled into UK government bonds. Okay? The markets were really settled, and players like Vanguard, who loads of viewers and listeners are invested with, have said we're going to invest more into this country. We've got confidence in it. Now, your second question, yes, all governments have had to manage debt in this way, and the mortgage comparison is a good one. But this government very clearly made a choice about a longer-term reduction of debt, and in this budget it's set out choices. And what we haven't talked about tonight, and I don't do it for facetious reasons, the budget had choices in it about measures to encourage companies to list in the UK for business people and founders like me. It had measures in it to encourage the improvement in the NHS, and it did give money to families on lower incomes because it didn't want to punish children for feckless parents. But the debt management issue, Sir John's report, with all due respect to the organisation he's done it with, as I understand it, is a long-standing pro-Brexit organisation. That's it will exist to campaign, and the characterisation of the budget is highly political, which Sir John is entitled to do.
Yeah,
but that's what's going on here.
But that doesn't make any of the facts wrong, does it? So is there a figure that you would like to dispute?
No, but...
OK, that's really important, because you're trying to trash the report by saying it's a Brexity report, but there's not a figure you would like to dispute.
It's the tone and the lack of other figures I would like to dispute.
Okay,
it didn't talk about, well, the international markets showing huge confidence in our country on Budget Day.
We are paying more for our debt and borrowing under Rachel Reeves this year than at any point under the worst even of Liz Truss, for example, because the markets are very worried by the scale of the extra borrowing.
But interest rates have been falling under this government and continue to fall, so that viewers and listeners' mortgages come down.
These are the longer-term interest rates for government to borrow. They're borrowing for 10, 20, 30 years.
Yes.
They're all higher than they were in October 2022 by quite a decent margin.
But what about 10 years before that?
In 2012,
I think they're higher than then.
Interest rates at 2012 were near zero because of the money printing and the fact the Bank of England was buying most of the bonds. So the 2012 comparison isn't a valid one.
What about debt levels over time?
Debt levels were much lower in 2012.
The debt levels are much higher. Some of that is COVID and the previous government. Some of it is now this government adding to it needlessly and rather dangerously. And as a result, we're having to pay an awful lot more for our borrowing. And that affects the refinancing as well as the new borrowing.
The markets are confident.
You're retiring old borrowing at low interest rates, and you've got to pay a lot more.
But the markets are confident. I mean, the markets are confident. I mean, under Liz Truss, the pound nearly fell to parity with the dollar.
Well, why are bonds all a lot cheaper than they were under Truss?
Well, but you can pick out bonds, but the actual overall
that's what we're talking about. That is government borrowing.
Yes, but you see, it's what really matters to people is what's the overall state of the economy, the pound in their pocket, the more wage rises in 10 months.
Well, inflation has almost doubled under this government compared with the 2% they inherited.
Historically, though, compared to the vast majority of years under Conservative administrations, it's a fraction of what it was.
No, it's not. In 2010 to 2024, inflation was most of the time around the 2% target, if not lower.
Exactly.
It only takes off after COVID.
Right.
So you're absolutely right if you compare it to the last 5 years. If you compare it to the 14-year period...
the last 5 years.
OK, but I'm now answering your questions for you. It's not. But you also make the point that I think leads on to growth, that actually the only way to get this under control is to get economic growth. But to do that, you need to tax people less. And the tax rises are strangling growth, which is the real answer to dealing with the excess of debt.
And you'll need more tax rises to pay all the extra interest charges. They reckon that the interest bill is going to go through the roof over the next 5 years in their official figures.
But not everybody is paying more tax. I mean, not everybody is. Lots of people on lower incomes who are just given up on society and politics are paying less tax.
They're paying more tax if they are working.
Okay,
and
they've got more money in their pockets. Can I be clear?
But in real terms, their tax rate's going up.
Yes, but they've got more money in their pockets. Wages have gone up.
This is Harold Wilson stuff.
Well, no, it's not.
Their wages have gone up, so has inflation.
No, but
and so is their tax.
People have been having wage rises in the last 16 months, more than they did in a decade
in the public sector,
under yourself.
Yes. And that's one of the reasons expenditure is through the roof and why now the interest rates are so much dearer.
Okay, well, I think we're ignoring international confidence in the UK economy.
I think we're overstating international confidence, but never mind. Thank you very much to my panel. In a moment.
And we must take all necessary measures to ensure the removal of any alien from any country who does not belong here.
Well, after an attack on 2 National Guard members, President Trump has halted immigration from 19 high-risk countries to prioritise American safety. Should Europe and the UK follow Donald Trump's lead and adopt a citizen-first approach?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
The weather's looking quite mixed across the Mediterranean through tomorrow and much of this week. There's further heavy rain towards the east affecting Greece, Albania and other nearby nations. Could see some severe thunder, landslides, other impacts as a result because it has been so wet recently. Other areas will also see some rain at times. There will also be some drier, sunnier bursts, but it's often going to be relatively unsettled and there is a bit more rain for many to come into the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Good evening, I'm here with your GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Some eastern parts may have a little bit of fog developing again tonight, but further west we're going to see increasing amounts of clouds, strengthening winds and some rain because there's a frontal system that's marching its way in. It's quickly going to spread across much of Northern Ireland, some heavy persistent rain developing here as we go overnight. Rain also feeding in across much of Wales, southwest England and filtering a little bit further eastwards as well, perhaps into western parts of Scotland at times too. Further east, staying drier, some clear skies here, could be a bit chilly and with that, like I said at the start, there could be some fog patches developing. Further west, a milder start to the day tomorrow because of the cloud, because of the rain and those blustery winds. We're talking gales in some exposed spots towards the west. So we start tomorrow on a bit of a damp note across many central, southern, western parts of England and Wales. That rain gradually making its way eastwards. Some glimmers of sunshine breaking through, however, from the west. Also pretty wet still across much of Northern Ireland, particularly towards the north. Some high rainfall totals likely to build up. Whilst northeastern parts of Scotland starting the day quite bright with just a few coastal showers around. Elsewhere it's going to be cloudy and increasingly wet as that rain continues to make its way north and eastwards across many places. It's going to make quite slow progress. It will take a fair while to clear away from some eastern, northeastern parts until well after dark tomorrow. But further west, something drier, brighter following in behind. Yes, some showers around, but a bit more sunshine on offer. Worth noting though, temperatures down a couple of degrees compared to today. Then after a cold, perhaps frosty, maybe foggy start for some of us on Friday morning, there'll be a bit of showery rain coming in before more unsettled weather arrives from the west as we go through the afternoon. So further heavy rain and some strengthening winds as well. And that takes us into what's set to be quite an unsettled weekend. Not a total washout. There will be some dry weather around, but also some pretty unsettled weather too. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Well, more mailmogs have come in, I'm glad to say, on the economy and debt. Paul says, every day now there's another nail in this administration's coffin. He's cheerful, Paul. We've had a relentless attack on free speech, unfettered and unchecked migration, the threat of digital ID, the dismantling of the jury system, financial incompetence beyond belief, lies and more lies from Starmer and his Chancellor, and yet more sleaze. Paul, you're sounding like my YouTube channel. I agree with every word you've said. Tony says, Labour know they are toast, so they are maxing out on the credit card on their crazy left-wing agenda. And Maria is my favourite mailmog of the year. We need more John Redwoods. I think we all agree with that very firmly. President Donald Trump has responded to the appalling attack on 2 members of the Washington, D.C. National Guard by an Afghan national by stopping immigration from 19 countries deemed to be dangerous, putting American safety at the forefront of his priorities. Meanwhile, as Europe's immigration crisis continues, top EU figures, including foreign policy chief Federica Mogherini, and he is no relation in spite of having Mog in his name, are facing corruption and procurement fraud accusations linked to diplomatic bodies. So should Europe and the UK be following Donald Trump's lead and putting its citizens first? Well, I'm joined now by the host of the Michael Knowles Show on the Daily Wire, the eponymous Michael Knowles himself. Michael, thank you for joining me. So what exactly has Donald Trump done? Is he saying that nobody from these countries can come into the US ever again?
So he's put a pause on migration from a number of these countries, and then he's looking into more extreme vetting measures for a number of other countries. This is not totally dissimilar to what we saw in the first term. However, I think it's a fulfillment of what he was elected for in 2016. Especially in 2024, where he won the popular vote, and most voters were extremely concerned with migration. And of course, in the wake of this horrific terror attack, where people who were brought into this country by Joe Biden under an operation titled Bringing in Our Allies, or supposed allies, these allies then launched terror attacks on us. And this was not the only one. There was a terror attack that was planned for Election Day of last year. So this has raised a question in people's minds, which is, what is the mass migration for? And President Trump has put it in characteristically blunt terms, especially with regard to Somali immigration. He said, these people don't contribute anything to our country. Why are we bringing them in? It's not politically correct, but it rings actually correct in most people's minds.
And what do you think the UK government should do? Because Donald Trump has been very forthright. He's bound in by the Supreme Court, but he's not bound in by the European Convention on Human Rights. What would you advise the British government to do to get control of the problem here?
Well, I think that the desire of the British people is quite clear, and there are many similarities between the Brits and the Americans. I think the English language is one of our only differences. However, the Brits have repeatedly stated that they want less migration. This, of course, was the large impetus for the Brexit. And then, unfortunately, after Brexit, many elites in the UK and in Europe managed to continue to give us more migration. After the Trump wins, we continued to get more and more migration, and the people haven't changed their minds on this. And so I think the way we talked about this issue 10 years ago was different than today. 10 years ago, at least in my country, the two views you could hold were more illegal immigration or only more legal immigration. But there was always more migration, and that's not what people want. We have too many people from abroad, and we haven't assimilated them. That problem is especially pronounced in the UK. It's reached an existential crisis. It's eroded social solidarity. And if the ruling elites will not take care of it, then I don't really see what their point is.
And America has always been historically very good at being a melting pot. People come to the United States and they become Americans, and they're very proud of that. Is that something that can be reinvigorated culturally? Or are the more recent arrivals people who just don't want to participate in that?
Well, you know, when the country was founded, to give a brief 250-year history, we obviously had a primarily English stock. And we didn't have a lot of migration for the first many decades of the country. In the middle of the 19th century, we started to bring in people, say Germans. And Germans are a little tougher to assimilate, but, you know, it's okay, we brought them in. Eventually, we started bringing in Italians, half of my family. They were harder still to assimilate. There actually were some challenges. The Irish, there were some issues. However, there are certain people who come from radically different places with radically different practices, with radically different religions. We can see this in Muslims taking over Dearborn, Michigan, Somalis taking over Minnesota, where assimilation is virtually impossible. Very, very difficult. There's nothing racist, there's nothing hateful about saying this. This has been an obvious fact of politics since Aristotle through Thomas Aquinas up to ordinary voters on the street today. And the issue is causing a major erosion of trust in our institutions, trust in our governments, trust in our own societies. Yes, there are times when we can bring people in and assimilate them, and that can be helpful. But when you have the highest foreign-born percentage of the population in your nation's history, probably the time has come to hit the brakes.
And it's a very interesting question because America has a constitutional right to freedom of religion, but is nonetheless a fundamentally Christian country. Is that the challenge? And is that what Donald Trump is essentially dealing with, saying that people who come here who don't have Christian values and may actually be in favour of violent means of achieving a different form of state are the ones that we've got to stop coming?
Yes, it's a Christian country, and we have a long history of toleration of all sorts of groups. However, going back to our old pal Aristotle and the law of non-contradiction, you cannot simultaneously uphold opposing views. And so you have to buy into some of the basic premises of the country enshrined in documents like our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution, our Federalist Papers, and our whole history. Look, we have In God We Trust in our national anthem. We have it on our currency. We have God in our Pledge of Allegiance. It's a Christian country, all right? And it doesn't mean that we can't bring in people from other belief systems, but they have to basically get on board. And when they refuse to assimilate, when they form enclaves, when they're hostile to Christianity, and when they are launching attacks on the American people themselves, at a certain point we have to say, all right, assimilation isn't working out so well. Perhaps it's time to go back to one of those periods of restricted immigration.
And how is this being received popularly? Because if you mentioned immigration 5 years ago in this country, the howls of racism were overwhelming, and it became almost impossible to discuss it rationally. Donald Trump obviously has his very strong supporters and equally strong detractors. What mileage are the detractors getting from, no doubt, their squeals of racism? Or is the country still solidly behind Donald Trump dealing with this migration problem?
Well, as in any administration, popularity is going to wane a little bit over time as the policies take a while to go into effect. However, it wasn't so long ago that President Trump won the popular vote. And I think that's what really shifted the conversation. Because not only did he win the popular vote with white men, say, but he won an historic percentage of black male voters. He won 46% of Hispanics. He won 40% of women under the age of 30, which is a hardline liberal demographic. So you can't call him racist. You can't call him sexist. I think that really began to flip the conversation. You can tell by how the Democrats are protesting. The anti-deportation riots have barely materialized. The demonstrations haven't worked. They've tried this No Kings protest. They think that, I don't know, an abstract campaign against monarchy or something, which frankly these days we look over and say, maybe monarchy wasn't the worst thing in the world when we look at our terrible bureaucrats and technocrats. But it's not salient. You know, Trump won the support of most voters running explicitly on mass deportations. And that means that mass deportations are now a mainstream political position.
Michael, thank you so much. I think there's a lot we Conservatives in the UK can learn from what Donald Trump is doing. So thank you for joining me this evening. In a moment, Jaguar Land Rover's design chief, Jerry McGovern, who was behind the woke rebranding of classic Jaguar and Range Rover logos and aesthetics, has abruptly left. With consumers rejecting politically motivated lefty products, is this the beginning of the end of woke culture?
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. We were talking about America primarily, and the mailbogs have come in, I think, by jet. Joanna says, shame our government does think the same way as Trump. Shame our government doesn't think the same way as Trump on migration. And James says, should governments put their citizens first? Is it a trick question? Well, if only they did. And Jay says, heaven forbid we have a leader who puts his own people first. See, Sakir, this is how you run a nation. As, of course, Margaret Thatcher did. She knew about her people, and that was all of us. Jaguar Land Rover's design chief, Jerry McGovern, has abruptly left the company just 4 months after the new CEO took over. Mr. McGovern was behind the Range Rover and Jaguar's controversial electric relaunch, including designs that were strange, dull and progressive. Isn't that a terrible word? Including a pink electric Jaguar, which was mocked by the one and only Donald Trump, with consumer demand evidently not favouring lefty, socially conscious products. Is this the beginning of the end of woke culture? Well, my panel is with me. It's John Redwood and Kevin Craig. Kevin, companies that insult their customers tend not to do very well unless they change track. Is that fair?
Did the company insult their customers with this? I mean, it's the...
Yeah, they said they didn't want 50-year-old bankers, sort of people like me and John, driving their cars. They wanted...
Very rude rhyming slang for this early, Sajid.
I don't know anything about Cockney rhyming slang. We don't have this in Somerset.
The point is, look, it happens in all directions. You remember Tesla started to lose sales because of a backlash against Elon Musk. What happened here was a very ill-judged tinkering with a very respected British brand, right? Who knows what's behind this actual departure? One has to be careful to comment on it. But your characterisation that consumers don't like lefty products, OK? Whoever wrote that is just, it's a little bit...
Me, I take responsibility.
Well, it's a little bit lazy because consumers react against products in all directions. Across the world, there's a massive B Corporation movement for companies that have...
Well, it wasn't until Trump came in.
That's been
Jacob,
dropping the world off. Is bigger than the United States of America. America and in this country
world.
and across, well, all of it is. So I think in this instance, Jaguar, mistake. All of us, I think, would agree on that. But the broader characterisation of a backlash against lefty, progressive, blah, blah, is not true.
Well,
you know, I think mess with brands at your peril, I'd say.
That, I think, is a very fair point. But the vegan stuff, everyone's discovered it's all got all the wrong things and E numbers in it, and that they're much better off eating proper products, that the idea of a woke industry and commercialism just hasn't taken off in the end, has it?
I think offer too much woke and you go broke, that's for sure.
And that rhymes as well.
Very good.
And I think we're seeing a bit of a decline in what was a fashionable consensus of a minority in the country. I'm all in favour of consumer choice, so if people want a lefty product because they have left-wing views, great by me. I won't actually be buying it myself. It's up to them. But I think Jaguar have decided to get rid of their existing clientele, and I think that's always a very dangerous, high-risk strategy. Because, I think they not only think that people like you and me are the wrong kind of people to be buying their cars, although I've had a Jaguar car in the past, but I also think they don't think we pay enough for them, because they used to be affordable luxury cars.
Yes.
They were good value luxury cars, unlike the 100,000 plus ones, where I think Jaguar now says we only want to sell cars to people who've got six-figure sums of money to spend on a new car, which is not that many people.
It's not that many people, and it's quite a crowded market.
It is, yeah.
But it's a bit like British Airways, isn't it, with when it put funny pictures on the back of its planes rather than the Union Jack, that companies should never, and it's exactly your point, should never offend their customer. You should always be on the side of your customer.
You should be on the side of your customer. But I think this links this story and the Trump one. We are, in this country, I think, a good example of racial integration. I think we're a post-empire country that can be proud of relations between different ethnic minorities. We've got problems, yes, in some enclaves about people not integrating, and there is political consensus on that and tackling it. But we are a modern Britain full of different people at all levels, but ultimately know your consumer. And this was just about a bad business mistake.
We can possibly end on a point of agreement, because I think what Ken says is right, that we have good integration, but we've had that when we've controlled immigration. And I actually agreed with Shabana Mahmood, saying it was very important for race relations to control immigration.
Yes, you need to control numbers for all sorts of reasons, and not least because you want people to have decent housing, and we can't build nearly enough houses.
Correct.
And if you invite in so many people, then housing conditions deteriorate.
Thank you both of my panel. And remember, if you go woke, you go broke, and that all the best products are conservative, particularly Bath Olivers, which should be brought back. Anyway, finally, we have a rule on State of the Nation where woke alterations of proper English are forbidden. Yesterday, one sharp-eared GBNews viewer wrote to us, correcting, not my programme, the record on a very important issue. This is, of course, cricket. He lamented the use of the word batter, which may be delicious with a Mars bar, I happen to think it is, as opposed to batsman, and warned us of becoming as PC as the BBC. I would like to reassure our loyal viewer that he has my full backing, and woke language will never be heard on my programme. It's batsman, it's chairman, and it's fireman. And I hope Avon and Somerset, Avon Fire Brigade, take notice, having fired somebody for saying fireman. It's completely stupid. Anyway, that's all from me. Up now is the one and only Patrick Christys. Patrick, I hope you're not going to be too politically correct this evening, because your viewers would be very upset if you had even a smidgen of political correctness.
No, well, don't worry. At 9 p.m, the Prime Minister appears to have committed to a new Islamophobia definition, and I'm going to say why I think that's awful. So we'll go in pretty strong with that. Also, are the Women's Institute and the Girl Guides right to ban transgender people? I'm also going to be talking about how much longer, realistically, can the Prime Minister expect to cling on? He was mauled again in the House of Commons earlier. And a load of anti-wealth protesters dumped bags of poo at the Ritz. All that and more.
Warm and cosy, with a chance of zero visibility. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good evening, I'm here with your GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. Some eastern parts may have a little bit of fog developing again tonight, but further west we're going to see increasing amounts of clouds, strengthening winds and some rain because there's a frontal system that's marching its way in. It's quickly going to spread across much of Northern Ireland, some heavy persistent rain developing here as we go overnight. Rain also feeding in across much of Wales, southwest England and filtering a little bit further eastwards as well, perhaps into western parts of Scotland at times too. Further east, staying drier, some clear skies here, could be a bit chilly, and with that, like I said at the start, there could be some fog patches developing. Further west, a milder start to the day tomorrow because of the cloud, because of the rain.